and welcome to Life an Inside Job, where today is all about sex, or rather, sensual pleasure. And I love and hate talking about sex. It's a very sticky subject, after all, in all kinds of ways. So I was excited to listen into Mangala Holland's wisdom because she knows a lot about this stuff and how to support people to find more sensual pleasure in their lives in a way that is absolutely not about looking sexy for other people. No surprises then that there is quite a lot of explicit language in this episode, and more of my terrible jokes, and the postman makes an appearance as well. Mangala Holland is a woman's empowerment and sexuality coach and a facilitator. She describes herself as being on a mission to help pussy owners become empowered through loving themselves fiercely, celebrating their sexuality, and overcoming the fear, guilt, and shame that keeps them playing small. And what I love about Mangala is that she has a beautiful, no bullshit, fluff free, grounded, dogma free style. And we lay it all out for you here. Thank you so much for coming to chat with me, Mangala.
Oh, thank you, Kate. I'm delighted to have this conversation.
The place that I wanted to start was to talk first about how can we be confident in our sexuality given that as and we're talking mostly about you work with women mostly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So let's frame this around women's sexuality.
hmm
Yeah. How can we be confident in our sexuality when mostly, certainly for women of my age, I'm in my 50s, that was shut down hard um, as a child, and
hmm
as a teenager, it was only ever about pleasing white men.
hmm
So, do we have a hope in hell of feeling confident in our sexuality after that?
the short answer is yes. Yeah, and I look at I'm almost 50 as well, and I look at my journey, the journey I've been on. I look at the journey of my clients, and I see this work as a deep reclamation of the parts of us that have been shut down.
Mm.
As you say, for those of us who've grown up in white Western environments, perhaps with religious conditioning, society being very um, squashing down of anything, especially anything connected to female pleasure and desire, is seen as dangerous, as taboo, as shameful, because it's all hidden. I really think that's a big part of it. When you think of it, male arousal is very obvious, shall
Mm.
we say, physically,
Mm.
and there's that very linear, powerful connotation with that with women, because I think because it's all hidden inside, it's there's a different element to that. And there's so many things that can block our confidence in sexuality. So of course, upbringing, just the layers of shame, like anything that
Mm.
you were told, especially when you were younger, it can stay as an imprint, and whether
Mm.
that's stuff you were told not to do as a child, or just not being confident and exuberant and spontaneous, which is, that is an essence of sexual energy, or just being that sense of freedom. And it can be things like, impacts from previous lovers, where somebody said something about your body, and
Mm.
it's stuck with you. All of this stuff, and of course, internalized patriarchy. We grow up with all these magazines and movies and everything else that give a very specific idea of what a woman should look like and how she should behave, and
Mm.
there's all of that, and then you add in like the explosion of porn in the last 20 years,
Mm.
and what labia should look like. There's the full range of
Mm.
stuff, and then if you throw trauma in the mix, it's it's deep stuff, Um, but the ways we can become more confident in our sexuality, I really believe this is where the empowerment is by learning to discover for ourselves what feels good in our bodies and discovering it for us, not for anybody else. And it's not about how we look, but about how we feel from the
Mm.
inside out.
Mm.
And that's where I get so many great results with my clients, is because we do a lot of work with movement and doing embodiment practices to tune into what it feels like to be in your body and not stuck in your head, which is a common thing for many women. Um, and also staying in the body, feeling safe in your body, and starting to notice what feels good and orienting towards what's pleasurable.
Mm.
Not just sexually, but everything, like feeling the sun on your skin or having a lovely cup of tea or like really good food. It's like doing the things that make you feel good and really tracking how that feels for you and nourishing yourself in that way. And that starts to open things up. And then when you take that into sexual explorations, particularly with self pleasure, and start to really work through whatever layers of numbness and stuff and getting out of your head and into your body, this is where the magic is.
Mm.
And I've had two clients in the last 2 weeks who said to me, I've just discovered that I love being on top. And I always felt too shy or too insecure to do that because of how I
Mm.
felt my body looked. And
Mm.
they've discovered that now everything's waking up inside and they're feeling just great in their, from the inside out. It's like, oh, that feels really good,
Mm.
And they're starting to experience orgasms that they've never had before. And it's like, great, you know? Um,
Yeah. So
and
I think that what I observe is that because we've marinated in all this stuff,
mm,
it's not just a sort of conscious understanding of, oh yes, well, so and so said this to me about my breasts, so
yeah,
I blah blah whatever. Um, it's often we often don't. It's so the negativity is so much part of who we are that we can't
yeah,
even identify it, and the
yeah,
levels of numbness are actually quite profound because
yeah,
if something is numb, you don't know if that it's there.
yeah, yeah,
No.
yeah. And one thing I tell my clients all the time is numbness is also a sensation. It's
Mm.
feedback, and numbness can be emotional as well as physical. And there's always
Mm.
a correlation between the two.
Mm.
And this is where, I've worked with people who've been to traditional therapists or GPs, and they're just given some massive plug-in device and said, just go home and keep plugging away, and this will fix you. And yeah, I'm seeing the reaction on your face there is just like, "Ugh," it's again pathologizing lack of pleasure, and there's so much medical gaslighting and stuff that happens
Mm.
towards women in general anyway, anything to do with sexual health, that when you throw that in the mix as well, it's it doesn't work. And as you say, with this negativity is, I really noticed that here in England since I've recently moved back. This-
Because say a bit about where you've come from and
yeah,
what you've
yeah.
moved back to, because that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so I've been overseas for 11 years, and I spent 5 years in Australia in Melbourne, and before that I did 5 years in Thailand on a small island, and I've also done a lot of traveling all over like India, Mexico, various other places. And some of the communities I was in Thailand and on my traveler days were very free and open and expressive, and that was a revelation for me, having come from stodgy, stiff England and my dad's repressed Catholic upbringing and all the stuff that got conditioned onto me, and I was very, very blocked in all of this until I left and went away. And but what was interesting about those circles is they were very white. It was mostly young, beautiful people. A lot of the whole yogi Lululemon kind of crowd, and I really struggled to fit in with that. And I didn't realize I was squashing myself into something I wasn't, because I was an older woman denying the elements of aging within that. And once I left those communities and moved to Australia, I really tapped into something much deeper. That was much more authentic and about my own authentic pleasure and power. And I think that's one of the beauties of the aging process um, is allowing that to unravel. And then coming back here, I've only been back since August, and it's such a fascinating thing because in my old days, I was in the corporate world, and I had this background in that, and also I would travel all over the country watching football every weekend with the lads and drinking 12 pints of lager and being one of the boys, and now I find it fascinating to just, yeah, there's so much of this is mindset work as well. And really pulling apart like, well, what's actually mine and what's the stuff the messages I've had from society and those around me.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
So did
yeah.
you notice a difference between attitudes in Melbourne and in where are you now? You're in the West Country, aren't you?
Yeah,